Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about jerkbaits. So suspending jerkbaits are going to be real important tools in the next few months. You know, late fall, winter, all the way into the pre-spawn. Suspending jerkbaits are some of the best baits to use during these colder months. First, before we get into the tackle that I use and really the topic at hand, which is rod length, I kind of want to talk about, you know, the rod selection with a jerkbait and how my opinions have changed. I did want to make a quick announcement or kind of a reminder. I've been doing a lot of content with a new channel called not Fish the Moment. That one's already established, but a channel that's kind of an offshoot of Fish the Moment, Bass Fishing Declassified. Myself and other anglers are doing a lot of great content over there. Most of the videos that we're doing are based on baits and locations for different regions of the country. So we want to make content specifically for different regions. So we've got anglers from up north, we've got myself here at the TVA, and also Florida and the West Coast, and we've got anglers for all different parts of the country, and we're doing that bait and location content that has been very well received. So if you're looking for that kind of video content, go to Bass Fishing Declassified. And also on fishthemoment.com, they're offering these great online virtual lessons. So if you go to fishthemoment.com, go to the virtual lessons page, you can book myself or anglers such as Randy Blockett, Matt Steffen, Jimmy Easterling. We're all offering virtual lessons where you can book us for an hour. It's just you and I, you know, talking bass fishing. You can bring a list of questions. I've had a lot of anglers recently book lessons where they want to go over a specific lake for a tournament that they've got coming up, and so I give them my suggestions as far as their approach, the techniques to use, and also locations. So we break down the lake in that way. So a really cool thing that they've got going on with those virtual lessons, so go to fishthemoment.com for that if you're interested. So let's dive right into jerkbait fishing. First off, let's talk about why a jerkbait is so important this time of year. So all throughout the South, obviously a jerkbait is getting a lot of attention right now throughout the year because forward-facing sonar has really opened up a lot of options for fishing a jerkbait and targeting specific fish that you see on forward-facing sonar. So you're seeing guys win tournaments, you know, in the summer, the spring, all over, you know, the calendar. But originally, and still the reason why a jerkbait is my favorite for this time of year is, you know, a jerkbait is probably the best imitation of shad that are distressed. Maybe there's a shad die-off, maybe they're stunned. And what happens during the winter time or the colder months of the year, especially December, when things really start changing, you know, the temperatures really start plummeting to their all-time lows for the season, shad aren't very resilient to those drastic cold water changes. So the water temperature, if it really drops like 10 degrees, it dropped 10 degrees the other day because it had been pretty warm. The water temperature were in like the 64 degree range, and then the very next day after a major cold front that we had, it was 10 degrees colder. So in those situations where the water is not only cold, but it got cold very fast, shad tend to get stunned. Sometimes you have a shad die-off, and a suspending jerkbait really imitates those distressed shad very well. So that's the reason why a jerkbait is so important this time of year, and why I've always got it tied on. But I wanted to go through my setup first off for fishing a jerkbait, and then talk about rod length, because this is something that I've actually changed my opinion on, and I've experimented with a lot of different types of rods for jerkbait fishing, and I've actually come to some surprising conclusions recently that I wanted to share with you guys. But let's talk about the basic overall setup. First off, a big key component to choosing the right tackle for a jerkbait is the fact that a lot of the tackle, when it comes to the rod and the reel, you want to be able to pick up a lot of slack quickly, both while you're working the bait and also when a fish hits it and runs towards you. You want to be able to pick up slack very, very fast. And so using a high-speed gear ratio reel is kind of really important to me. This right here is the Fitzgerald VLD10. I use the 8.1 to 1 gear ratio, but anything from 7 on up is kind of the right gear ratio range in my book. Anything below 7 is probably a little bit too slow. You know, they're well suited for crankbaits, but not jerkbait fishing. And then the line that I like to use is, I like to use 100% fluorocarbon. I mean, I really don't have a use for braid or monofilament for jerkbait fishing all that much. And fluorocarbon does a really good job at getting that bait down to, you know, the maximum depth, because it isn't buoyant, it sinks. And the general rule of thumb when it comes to a line size is the lighter the line, or the smaller the diameter, the more action you're going to get out of a bait. So the more side to side, you know, freedom, that action from side to side, you're going to get it better with a lighter line, and you're also going to get deeper. But conversely, if you're using heavier line, like maybe 15-pound test or something like that, it's going to have less side to side action because it's going to have less freedom. It's going to be a little bit more impeded, and it's going to go shallower, which isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes you're fishing shallower fisheries where you've got bigger fish, heavier cover, and you want that heavier line, and you're not worried about depth or the overall, you know, side to side action. Sometimes it's so cold and you want an action that's a little bit, you know, less wide of an arc. So, but generally my favorite line size is going to be 10-pound test, because it gets down there deep, it's got plenty of strength, and it gives that jerkbait a lot of action. So most of the time, unless I'm fishing really shallow, 10-pound test is the line size for me. And as far as the type of fluorocarbon that I like to use, one of the problems with fluorocarbon is the fact that it generally gets pretty stiff in the colder months. And so I've landed on a line that is designed to stay soft, supple, and it gives that bait a lot of freedom. And it's called Invisex from Seagar. So I use Invisex because, like it says on the label, it's soft, supple, and it doesn't get as, you know, wiry or stiff during the winter months. Okay, so it's a little advantage that I think that Invisex gives you with the action of these baits. So that's why I use it. All right, so let's dive into the rod. This is actually the whole reason why I wanted to do this video, because I've talked about my setup for jerkbait fishing quite a bit, but recently I really started to adjust my thought process on you know, specifically rod length, because when I first started out, you know, and I was researching fishing jerkbaits back in California, and you know, back there we also call them rip baits, I learned that most people were fishing shorter rods. So like 6.5 foot was the standard for fishing a jerkbait, which sort of made sense because, you know, you want a rod that's real nimble and allows you to create that nice erratic side to side action by jerking that rod tip, and you know, it made sense. So the 6.5 foot was what I started out with, and for years I used that because that's what everybody said you needed to be throwing. But one thing that I was really frustrated with was, you know, especially as I was growing, you know, I'm 6'2" now, and I was probably close to 6 foot when I was in high school. I was noticing that with a 6.5 foot rod, that shorter rod, I was hitting the side of the boat a lot, which was really frustrating. And I also had a problem bringing up that slack. If I had a fish grab the bait and push it towards me, it would take me a lot to be able to, I'd be way back here before I actually connect with that fish. And so the short rod, just over time, it started to feel like it wasn't the right rod length for me. Then I switched to a 7-footer. Things got a little bit better. I was able to pick up more slack. I was hitting the side of the boat less, but still quite a bit. And then finally, I ended up settling on this 7.3. This right here is the 7.3 medium action Versa series rod. It's got overall great action to it, and the action is good for creating good movement with the jerkbait. But the 7.3 length was really the key, because it allowed me to pick up a lot of slack. I was able to eliminate a lot of the, you know, boat hitting, because it was long enough that every time I'd go ahead and try to create a little bit of action with that bait, I'd actually connect, you know, pull the slack out and connect with that bait much faster, eliminating that boat slap. I don't know if I'm the only one that experienced boat slap, but it's really frustrating to just constantly be hitting the side of your boat with your jerkbait rod. So the 7.3 has been the one that I've been using for the last like 4 years or so, and I really like this rod. But recently I was in the garage and I was about to you know, set up some jerkbait rods for fishing out here on Lake Chickamauga, and this rod was sitting in the corner. It's a rod that I used to use quite a bit, you know, a couple years ago, but once Fitzgerald introduced the all-purpose composite series, I kind of put this one to the wayside for my crankbait fishing and all that, and I didn't have a whole lot of use for it. But this right here is the 7.6 medium heavy cranking rod, Versa series cranking rod from Fitzgerald, and it's a longer rod, 7.6, and I picked it up and I was like, man, that could be a really good jerkbait rod, because you know, it's long, it's not going to take a whole lot of effort to be able to pull that slack out of the line to create the right action, but also has set the hook on a fish. And so I tied it on. I didn't know how it would work out, how I'd feel about it. I felt like maybe the problem would be it would just be too draining, you know, too tough to fish throughout the day. So I tried it, you know, a couple weeks ago, and let me tell you, I absolutely loved fishing with this longer rod. Number one, again, I almost completely eliminated any rod slap that I was experiencing, or boat slap, you know, hitting the side of the boat with the rod. When I did get a bite, I'd be able to just, you know, do a quarter, you know, turn of my body to connect with that fish, and I'd get good solid hook sets and be able to pick up that slack really quick. And just overall, it just felt right. So, you know, that's what I wanted to just kind of discuss today, is the fact that maybe, just maybe, we were wrong about those shorter rods. Of course, it has to do with your overall size, how you're built. You know, if you're you know, 6'2" like myself, a longer rod makes more sense. But if you're a shorter guy, maybe 5.5 foot or something like that, a shorter rod is probably going to be more comfortable for you. So it really depends on you know, your height and just what you're comfortable with. But when it comes to picking up slack and being able to work a bait without hitting the side of the boat all the time, and a lot of people don't you know, work a jerkbait the same way I do. I like to pretty much work the rod tip down, straight down, instead of like to the side. I don't like doing the to the side action that much. But if you're like me and you like, you know, working the jerkbait with the rod tip down, you probably hit the side of the boat, and so choosing a longer rod actually might be the solution for that problem. But even if you aren't that type of guy that hits the side of the boat all the time, the fact that you can pick up more slack with a longer rod is actually a big advantage overall in my book. So anyways, guys, those are some thoughts on jerkbait rods. Let me know what you think about fishing a jerkbait. Do you think the shorter rod is better, or do you think a longer rod might be a better solution for fishing a suspending jerkbait? Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and also drop a comment below. I'm going to see you out on the water.